are the talk. We are the talk station of the nation. 95.1 Nigeria Info.
Nothing breaks the news like the news. Trust me, I can prove it. I'm ready. Let's take on the biggest debates on radio, provide insights, experience, and build an unforgettable discussion together. I'm Femi D.
And we're back to the Morning Crossfire on your number one news, talk, and sports station, Nigeria Info.
It's Morning Crossfire. With Femi D live on your number one talk, news, and sports station, 95.1 Nigeria Info.
Thanks for staying with us right here on Nigeria Info. It's 12 minutes past 8 a.m. Nigerian time, today being the 15th day of March. Yes, it's a Monday. And it's a Monday where we essentially need to discuss the issues with regards to the oil sector. Why do I say this? Okay, so we have this concept around the oil sector being possibly perceived in three stratas. At least on paper it is. You have the upstream sector, you have the midstream sector, then you have the downstream sector. Down there in the downstream sector is where a lot of us make contacts with, the issue of petrol or no petrol, diesel or no diesel. And the more we look into the mathematics around the availability, the resources, the calculations, templates or no templates, the more we find out that it can and it has resolved to remain very confusing over time. And that brings me forward to a new conversation. Last week, there was a question around what could be the latest move around petrol price. Here's the reason why. The PPRA, in an attempt to be transparent as regulators, did publish a template that projected, and I use this word carefully, projected the price of petrol to cross the 200 naira mark. And a lot of people picked up on that, and that even sent a lot of people to the filling stations in an attempt to get fuel. Now, in order to salvage this process, the NNPC released a statement to say, well, we're not reviewing or changing the price of petrol in March. And then the Minister of State for Petroleum Resources also came on to voice his concern and also to emphasize the direction of the government with regards to petrol. But that's not just all. These are not the only stakeholders. There are marketers, there are independent suppliers, there's the Port Authority, and there's a lot more going on. And there's also where we get this oil from and how the people therein have been treated. Some call them, they say these are the states that produce, oil-producing states, and the treatment has become questionable. But to put perspective to this conversation today with me, with regards to enablers of corruption in the oil sector, would have to be Mr. Oke Epia, the founder of Order Paper. He joins me now on the show. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Femi. Good to be here.
Where do we start from? I know it's interesting to analyze the oil sector all the way from the fundamentals of how it is structured and how it was bound to be structured. But let's go back. Let's start off from this concept of how is this structured when we say upstream, midstream, and downstream. What does that mean?
Well, you gave a hint in your introductory remark, and I like that you ended it at the point where you said the downstream is where virtually everyone, interacts with the crude oil that Nigeria is blessed with. Upstream has to do with getting the crude from the ground, the drilling and the exploration and all of that process. Many Nigerians are not interested in that. It's just what the government and, its JV partners, are into. Where midstream comes down away from that exclusivity, you have more involvement because that's where you have the processing of the crude, the transportation of the crude, the storage of the crude and all of that. And so you have more stakeholders, more business persons get in that space. And, of course, downstream is where you and I interact with the product, where it gets to the retail spots, where Nigerians are able to buy petrol, at the gas stations, so that is downstream. Incidentally, the downstream is where, understandably, the concerns continue to, sustain. The concerns around the pricing of products of petroleum, premium motor spirits. The pricing, the availability, the distribution, and indeed the impact of all of this on the pockets and lives and living conditions of Nigerians. Because we have a system where the government plays the dominant role, and decides, to a large extent, continually decides the price of products. So everything boils down to the involvement of governments to a large extent. And when government is involved, unfortunately, there have been, insinuations, there have been cases, there have been situations where we see that there isn't enough transparency, there isn't enough accountability, and there are leakages and wastages, down the process of, the different processes situated in the downstream sector. And some of these are clear corruption cases that, so beyond insinuation, there's been a report that was put together under the auspices of NATI, which is Nigeria Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, which sought to address, the title is Addressing the Inefficiencies in the Downstream Sector. And, so that report gave life, empirical, life to some of these insinuations and suspicions that have hitherto, been around. Oh, there's corruption. Oh, there is smuggling. Oh, there is within around 3 key areas, right? One is the daily consumption data. How are we sure what they say we consume in this country on a daily basis, respect to PMS, is what we consume? How is it determined, right? Based on that determination, because we do not produce, we do not refine the product, importation is done based on that determination. And because government is solely involved, for some years, it is the NNPC that does the importation based on whatever data that it chooses or it's able to get from other stakeholders to import the product. So the importation process is another key node within the downstream sector where there is this, question around lack of transparency and possible corruption. The third one being around the transportation of the product itself within, from, arrival into the country to the depot, from the depot to the retail outlets and all of that, and then gets to, people's cars and all of that. So and that's where the focus is on the Petroleum Equalization Fund, a very little known agency, but very powerful agency of government that Nigerians.
I'm not too sure I even knew about it until recently.
Very powerful, I repeat, very powerful agency of government that does a lot, but very, very, in a manner that requires a lot more transparency, let me put it that way. So the study highlighted these 3 key processes and also spotlighted these 3 agencies of government that are, involved. So in the first lane, you have the PPPRA, and I'm glad you mentioned that, the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency, which is supposed to be the statutory body that determines prices, that determines all of the value chain metrics and, what should eventually be the price bands, which it usually does and which it tried to do last week, But you see, because of the issues around regulatory overlaps, the issues around, overlapping of functions, you saw the immediate reaction, even from within the government, by the NNPC, the Minister of State for Petroleum had to make, a rebuttal, and, but the agency just simply did its job, right, if you ask me. But you see, these are the issues that we talk about. So when you have such, regulatory overlaps, you're bound to have issues around. So where's the transparency in the process? So within that, space around the determination, the PPPRA is under spotlight. Then, of course, the last stage of transportation of the product and, where you have issues around bridging claims, national transportation allowances, which is where the issue is. It's where you have the Petroleum Equalization Fund. So this study in reference made some of these issues with empirical facts and figures to show that there are clear cases of inefficiencies and clear cases of corruption that we need to address. And why it is important to address this is what I would say next. But it seems like
No, I was just, we're going to have to dwell more on this issue of corruption connected and some of these other areas. And before we go into those critical areas, I just wanted people to understand a little bit of how we arrived at, for example, the government controlling a good part of the oil sector. I'm looking through one of those reports now, Petroleum People and Power, one of your publications from other people, and it talks about how in 1969, the Petroleum Act led to the establishment of a few organizations down the line. At some point in time, we had the likes of Nigerian National Oil Company, and we had that in play. And then, of course, in 1975, down the line, we had the likes of the NNPC. Please don't be troubled by the many terminologies, if I may say, that come along with these situations as we go along. You had that go down, formally formed, and now at the back line of all this is the fact that the PIB is also suggestively bringing forward that there's going to be another company that will be formed to see how all this plays out. But let's go back a little bit now. So 3 organizations in the downstream sector to a large extent determine how things go. I mean, the recent study you put forward about enablers of corruption talks about the fact that premium motor spirits, which we easily call petrol now, is one of the value chains of the petroleum products, and it makes up about 60% of what is consumed in the country. Which brings me forward, is it that these agencies choose not to work together, or one is stronger than the other, or the triage is not supposed to be in the very first place? What's the correlation between these 3 that has brought about these 3 critical data that we're now hoping to examine and understand whether it's a lack of transparency or it's just corruption kicking in its way all the way through?
Brilliant question. All of these factors combine together to give us what we have. So there is a lack of synergy, and there is what you also may call a dereliction of duties, especially on the part of the PPPRA. Now, this is how it is. The entire value chain, how it affects Nigerians and the pocket at the petrol stations. NNPC imports the products, as we already know. The sole importer of the products, Based on that, it trickles down. Marketers pick this product, and then it goes to the fuel stations. So along the line, in determining the pump price, there are a couple of metrics that are taken into account, which is what, at the end of it all, you have the ex-depot price that the PPPRA releases. And one of those metrics, which is very key, is the NCA, National Transportation Allowance, the bridging claims undertaken solely by the Petroleum Equalization Fund. And that is already put as the cost, is already imputed into the cost of petrol. It's part of what you pay for. And that cost is also, the argument is that, okay, look, we are importing this product, but we want this product to sell at a uniform price across the country. We want consumers to buy petrol at the same price, whether you are in, Koranamunda, whether you are in, Mina, whether you are in Benin, buy at the same price. That is the essence of, in fact, that is the reason why you have the Petroleum Equalization Fund, right? So all of that is already built into the cost price of petrol that everyone buys at the petrol station. So that is the basic fundamental. But you see, NNPC imports based on what data? How does NNPC determine this is the quantity of petrol that we need on a daily basis, and then imports? Don't forget that we had 4 refineries in this country. These refineries were created to be able to distill, to refine products, crude, so that we will not, this importation thing, and 445,000, liters is what the allocation is. That is what these 4 refineries are able to, that is the capacity of these 4 refineries, right, in this country. But you see, because they are not producing, and we continue to keep these refineries at a humongous cost to the nation. I was just checking out the data. Just in June last year, 10 billion naira was spent in keeping moribund refineries that are not working, that are not producing zero crude oil.
10 billion naira
crude oil in this country. And so if you compute that throughout the year, and for the many years that we've had these refineries not working, what is that waste? What is that waste? What is that corruption about? That's just an aside. So on what basis, on what data does NNPC use to import the product as sole importer of the product into this country? And within that NNPC importation space in itself, it does what we know as direct sales, direct purchase. So it takes crude, Nigerian crude that belongs to the government, and sells it abroad.
About 95%, they make about 94% from that crude sales, right?
Yes. I mean, with respect to the general overview, the foreign exchange, crude is the mainstay of that.
Mainstay, yes.
So the crude that it takes out is supposed to receive a commensurate amount of refined products, PMS to be specific, that now goes into the local market. So the amount of crude taken out and the amount of crude brought back into this country is a matter of mystery. To the extent that even the National Assembly is instituting a probe currently to find out these details. It's perhaps only the NNPC that knows. And don't forget, they do this because they wanted to eliminate subsidy. Nigeria was spending too much on subsidy. It was actually budgeted for until the current administration came in 2015 and they all thereabout. They cut out the subsidy in a sense, but introduced what they call under recovery. In other words, you are still paying some money to get what, and this money is not appropriated. It's solely determined and received, collected by the NNPC directly from the Federation account.
So let me understand this. They stopped subsidy, okay, and started what you call under recovery?
Under recovery.
Which is another terminology for a type of subsidy.
In a sense.
In a sense. Even though President Buhari at some point in time said subsidy is a scam. By the way, I have that on record. I don't know do you mind if I share that with people again?
That is clearly a matter of public record.
Oh, okay. So in case you missed out on that, this just for a few minutes, just to clear things up so that it doesn't, because the next question I'm about to ask may need to have a background to this.
Well, on Saturday, I told you that I've been in petroleum for 3 and a half years. I don't understand what the Nigerian economists and the member of the government, their definition of that they are subsidizing Nigerians for the oil they are buying. Who is subsidizing who? The Nigerian oil industry, petroleum industry, was developed with Nigerian capital. Because most of the expertise are Nigerians, if you go into the field. It's Nigerian capital, it's Nigerian oil. What I understand Nigeria should charge Nigerians is the cost of one barrel at the wellhead, and then the cost of transportation to the refinery, the cost of refining it, and its cost at the pump. If anybody said he is subsidizing anything, he is a fraud.
So, if he says it's a fraud, then is the Minister of Petroleum Resources, yes, that's on record as well, because he has retained that portfolio, not just once now, even in the second time. Explain to me what version of what that subsidy described as a fraud and the under recovery, or the version of subsidizing that is now being put together by the NNPC, getting money directly from the Federation account to shock some other places. What does this all mean?
Okay, Nigeria's refineries do not produce an ounce of petroleum. So all the consumption that we have in this country is imported. And because they have to be bought at the international market, you have to buy them at the international price. The irony is that this is a product that we have. We do not need to go through this, but here we are. So whenever there is a rise in the price of barrel, we have to also bear the consequences. In other words, government is no longer paying the subsidy. That is where you find that it trickles down to the consumer, because as currently the price of barrel is around over 70 or thereabouts.
Yeah, it ranges.
And so the additional costs from where it was when it was less, government is no longer paying subsidies, so it comes down to the Nigerian. So it is that price, the global price, that's what you call the global volatility. If you are no longer paying subsidy, So the consumers of the product have to bear the brunt. And I like the way that you play that soundbite, because if anybody says he's paying subsidy, it's a fraud. That is a very strong soundbite. The NNPC needs to explain to Nigerians in clear terms what under recovery means. Because I said to you earlier that they do what they call direct sales, direct purchase. You take the amount of crude you need to get the amount of refined products you need back into the country. So where is the differential coming from? There is perhaps even no exchange of cash, because it's like trade by barter, isn't it?
Yes, it's supposed to be.
Exactly. So where are you getting the amounts, the cost from that you call under recovery, which in about, I think in 2019 alone, or thereabout, it cost us over 700 billion naira.
700 billion naira?
700 billion. I think it's 770-something billion naira that NNPC took directly from the nation's purse without appropriation to pay for what it calls under recovery.
Did the National Assembly care to even look into this?
This is part of the issues. The National Assembly had a subsidy probe way back in 2012, 2013. You remember the issue?
Yes.
It became controversial and all of that. The DSDP thing that I'm talking about has also been a subject of probe by the National Assembly, specifically the House of Representatives in the last National Assembly. You know, they probed the DSDP regime, I think, from 2014 to 2017. We do not know what happened to that probe. We do not understand why the report was not received and adopted or debated in plenary of the House of Representatives. And now they are starting another probe of the same DSDP regime from 2018 to whenever. So, I mean, I'm just trying to answer your question with more questions.
Oh, yeah.
What is the National Assembly doing as representatives of the people? Why are they not sitting up and, asking these questions and getting answers and let Nigerians understand? I mean, some of these questions have been clearly, asked, and we have answers by the National Assembly. We will not probably be having this conversation. We'll probably not be here talking about or asking NNPC to give us more clarity on what under recovery means and who actually gets this money and all of that. So these are the issues. These are now loopholes. These are possible knots for corruption. And it is not my word. You heard the president say it, that it is a fraud. So it's just like a nomenclature change.
This is Nigeria Info.
Nigeria Info.
A great talk show unravels your thinking, makes you stop to listen, engages you in a debate of opinions,
I believe this man knows what he is doing. He is a Nigerian.
and ultimately brings you to the king of talk radio, Femi D. Live. And we're back to the Morning Crossfire on your number one news, talk, and sports station, Nigeria Info.
It's Morning Crossfire. Here, Femi D live on your number one talk, news, and sports station. 95.1 Nigeria Info.
Nigeria Info.
It's 8:40 a.m. Nigerian time. This is Morning Crossfire right here on Nigeria Info 95.1. Much to talk about. My guest has been providing interesting perspective to the issue of oil, what's going on in the oil sector. Let's talk about corruption enablers in the oil sector. Oke Epia, who is the founder of All the People. You have quite a number of reports that best provide you with information about how and when and what's moving and what's not moving and what is seen to be moving and what seems not to be in sight of what to move. Before the break, I was asking the question about is Petroleum Equalization Management Board the subsidy company?
No, the Petroleum Equalization Fund is not involved with subsidy or under recovery. What it does is to equalize the price of products across the country. That is its mandate. So whether as we get the products imported into the country and as these products are transported from the ports and those areas closer to the ports to further than the country, government believes that the prices should remain uniform. And by the way, just to mention, in a deregulated system, that should not be in place. So if government says it has deregulated or it is deregulating, then it has questions to answer why it continues to retain that organization, Petroleum Equalization Fund. So the function of that fund is basically to make certain payments to marketers who move the product further down, the country. And those who move closer down the areas of importation make certain payments to it. So there is a differential that allows a uniformity in theory of the price of petroleum products across the country. But, before this study that we have been referencing came about, there have been insinuations, indeed examples, where you see that is not the case. People would not buy the same price in Abuja and further than the east, for instance.
I don't think that's happened in 10 years.
So
Never happened.
That gave you a huge question mark around what exactly are these monies that the fund collects. What does it do with this money? So what is the reason for its continual existence? Especially now that we are deregulating that sector. Why do we need to have the Petroleum Equalization Fund? The PAF is a different kettle of fish that requires a whole period of conversation. Maybe at some time we'll come have that.
Yes, we should.
But I just wanted to clarify your question. They are not directly involved in the subsidy regime or under recovery regime. That is the sole business of the Nigeria National Petroleum Corporation.
I like the phrase under recovery regime. It sounds like something to really examine. It sounds complicated. But when we think about it, the PMS, which is what we're struggling with right now, the price of fuel, because if you ask any Nigerian right now, what's the pump price of fuel, they will give you at least 3 real-life answers. They're all correct, by the way. Some will tell you it's over 200. Some will tell you some are selling at the pump, the original pump price. Some are wondering what they should sell about. And yes, it's confusing in real life. And now I'm sure we're all hoping this settles down. But I guess what has brought about the trigger of a moment like this would have to be the fact that there are corruption enablers that down the line points in this way. Let me mention some from your report. There's the issue of weak enforcement, function overlaps. There's the undercover bogey now. What could be here? What do these enablers mean, and what effect have they provided to the sector thus far?
They have hidden the corruption that has existed in the downstream sector. That's why they are called enablers of corruption. Because it's a sector that has been solely regulated, as it were, by the government. And whatever it is that government has its hands on is usually quite questionable, unfortunately. Unfortunately, very unfortunately. More so because this is a product that we should not be going through this kind of hardship over, because we have that resource, right? So the involvement of the National Petroleum Corporation and the roles that the PPPROA should play. So let me put it this way. The PPPROA ought to be the determining agency, the agency that should determine how much amount of crude oil we should import to meet local daily consumption. Does that agency have the data? Who determines that? That study shows clearly that. And what happened last week clearly exemplifies the study, the finding of the study that the PPPRA does not perform that function as determined by its statutes. So that kind of, hazy or non-performance or shaking of responsibility, what does it do? It creates room for all manners of interferences and interventions solely around that importation process. And I have been talking about the direct sales, direct purchase regime that the NNPC does with its under recovery scheme. Who supervises that? The PPPRA ought to be deeply involved, but the study shows that it is not involved. So you see weak enforcement. Yes. This is the first point that you just raised. You see regulatory overlaps where the PPPRA issues a price bandwidth or its ex-depot template, and then NNPC speaks up almost immediately to say, look, this is not correct. That is function overlap. So there is something going on that we are not being told. One agency is being suppressed, perhaps, from, perform its roles and responsibilities. By who? For why? For what reasons? Why do we not have the details of the importation of the amount of petrol that we consume in this country? Why is it rocket science? So, for instance, this is one key aspect of the report. In being able to determine that, there ought to be, a determination of what is consumed at the gas stations, at the petrol stations. That does not happen. What these agencies do, they rely on the data, the petrol that is taken from the depot to the petrol stations, what they call the truck out, products. But that's not where it happens, because we have seen and we have heard situations where these products are taken supposedly to destinations and they never get there, or they are taken across the border.
Yes, true.
So the appropriate, points to determine the amount of consumption, the factual amount of consumption, should be at the gas stations. But there is no means or metrics in place to determine that as we speak amongst these three agents, including the PEF, because the PEF has a software it calls Aquila, for instance, that it uses to monitor that the claims and allowances it pays actually determined by the distances. So it has this tracking device it calls Aquila, by the way, which the government approved 17 billion naira to procure. 17 billion naira to procure a software. And yet we still not have the value that we should have for that. So there is no data at the pump points of petrol stations. So there is that arbitrariness solely at the level of the importation of the product. You see the PPPRA is helpless. You see the NNPC is overbearing. And you see a PEF that is not able to determine and to able to verify that the claims that it pays right, is based on value for money. You see the enabling situation. So when you see all of this going on, and all they keep telling you is that you have to pay more for petrol, but you are not cutting your bets. You are not downsizing corruption. You are not downsizing the waste. You are not downsizing the inefficiency that we see in the system. So why you pass it on to the consumers? There's just so much that we can take. So if you cut out all of this waste, all of these inefficiencies, perhaps we'll not be paying as much as we're paying for petrol. That's the point.
And I agree with you with regards to that. I mean, there's so many no reliable consumption data. We really do not know what's going in, what's coming out. And rule of the term, price differential, under recovery bogey. We could go on. And of course, the software as well. Let's bring in people to join this conversation at this time. It's a brilliant time to join in. The numbers are 0700-951 and then 0000. Should I take that again? Oh, I'll take it again. 0700-951 0000. That will get you through to join this conversation live on Nigeria Info 95.1 on Monday Crossfire this very day. So let's take your input into this, because really, the more you talk about it, the more confusing it appears to be.
Hello?
Yes, welcome. Good morning. How are you today?
I'm okay.
Good. What's your name?
I'm very, very okay. And I'm very, very happy to be our guest there. I greet you. Thank you, sir.
Good morning.
I know it's also my MHC. Thank you, sir, for letting Nigerians, more especially the oil-producing states, to know the monumental fraud that is going on in the oil sector, petroleum sector. Not just this very administration. Since the inception of oil exploration from oil-producing states, there is uncountable, in fact, looting, stealing that is going on in that area. Just few years or whatever, you had 700 and some fraction billion that is not accounted for. I will tell you that over trillions of dollars have been stolen from that region. This is the money that was supposed to be used to develop that part of the country. But go there, you see people living in abject poverty. In fact, poverty walking barefooted. I am not blaming the elite there or their politicians, because they don't want transparency in that area. But I am after the youth of that part of the country. It will not stop.
Okay, let
me finish by saying, Atiku told us that when he comes in, he is going to sell some of those, whatever they call it, those who came into power to.
Austin, are you there?
Hello?
Yes,
Hello?
yes, just to round off, yeah.
The election against that, because they know what they're coming in to do.
Okay, thank you, Austin. Good morning to you. Glad you connected with us. Let's talk.
Dr. Febidi.
How are you today?
Good morning to everybody. Good morning to my brother, Austin Oyemechi. Good morning to our guest. This is Adewale Daniel calling.
All right, Adewale,
let's talk. I would like to ask you, my brother, the guest, what is the way forward? Look at now in Nigeria. Can we say we are cowards in a country that we are over 200 million? Okay. Can you hear me, Febidi?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can.
Thank you. I said that, can we say we are cowards in this country?
I did hear you.
Few people, those who put us into this problem, they are not up to 1 million. for over 200 million Nigerians suffering. Look at now, last week, 5 trillion missing NNPC. A lot of money has been missing. Under former GMD, 26 million oil deal was bid by the government. Former Minister of State for Petroleum said then, the President Muhammadu Buhari said that they should continue work together. Up to today, nobody asked questions. Now we masses are suffering. Today I hear another one. 1.4 billion naira to spend as a refreshment in federal inland revenue. Where this money come from? It comes from the
Okay. All right.
the Nigerian Port Authority. What is the way forward? What can we do?
Thank you, Adomi.
Now or never.
Okay, Adomi, let's leave it at that. You ask the question, you provide the solution. Yes, good morning to you. If you can turn down the volume of your radio, we'll be able to keep your call. Good morning.
Good morning, Femi D. And good morning, the guests there.
Yes, welcome. Go on, let's talk.
Mr. Paul, the Indomitable.
Let's talk,
Are you
Mr.
getting
Paul.
me?
Yes, let's talk, Mr. Paul.
Yes. I want to thank your guest. I think he has really shown his professionalism on the oil sector. The issue is that we all know that that sector is decked with corruption, not starting with this regime. But I could say from the onset of oil discovery in Nigeria, there have been corruption in the oil sector. We don't even know how much we are producing, neither did we know how much we are taking out. Because I understand that in the high sea, oil tankers are loading Nigerian crude and going away as they like. Not even Nigerian Navy could stop them. So what I would like to say, demolorate what those of us, the small fries, see in the downstream. Let us talk about privatization and actually see to it, like what is done in the communication. Let us see the establishment of refineries and doing away with the 4 refineries that we can that can produce, and we are using billions to maintain them. If we could do that, I tell you, the price will take its natural course. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Price will take its natural course. Let's take one more call on this. Good morning.
Hello.
Yes, good morning.
I'm Olu calling from Boy.
Olu, welcome. Let's talk.
Yeah. Telling our refineries will keep us more problems, especially in Nigeria, whereby private businessmen are as good as the government. They're all built on the like monopoly. The best thing to do is regional government take over all the 4 refineries if at first want to sell them. Take over the federal government shares in them. Now, the main problem is we need to sit down and calculate the liter of crude oil that leaves this country, and then let us know which countries are buying crude from us and which refineries are refining for us in direct, in their, what they call under delivery process that NNPC is on with. Which refineries are refining? Germany has over 80 refineries, but doesn't have crude oil. The oldest crude oil refinery in the world is still working up to date. Now, we need to know how much of our crude is going out and what quantity and of what product is coming in. Then, first, that we are supposed to have accurate tracking of their system because it is really not working. You have a tanker leave oil in the depot going to Mina. They pay the same money as a tanker leaving Lagos to Mina. It's not supposed to happen so. They don't pay them flat rates. All you need is send in your bill and then they pay everybody. It's very wrong. And then NNPC needs to reduce the what I call technical staff. It's too much. Go to the head office. It's almost like a nation. People that knows nothing about petroleum, that are doing nothing, are just being employed every day, and then mostly enjoy. Go to the downstream sector where they come down the sector.
All right.
They employ divers almost every 2 months. They just sack people without anything. They employ them today. They train you. Before you know it, 6 months or so, they terminate your employment. They employ new set of people.
Okay.
All just for people not to understand what is going on in NNPC.
Wow.
That
is a very courageous approach to this. It said it's always like a nation. I've never heard that before, but I never imagined it could be used as such. Let's read some messages we do have going on with regards to this. Okay. Well, Here's what somebody says from the airport road here in Abuja. Adolfo says the fuel and crude oil and refinery scam in Nigeria is an incorporated corruption. All arms of government and the middlemen and marketers, as well as the spurious agencies such as DPR, PPRA, PEF, NNPC, are major beneficiaries. KD Omawe says your guest has spoken eloquently. I listened to this soundbite very clearly. I had to listen to it every day. The president, then the presidential candidate, said it said it very clearly that if anybody says he's subsidizing anything, it's fraud. Today, you hear the contradictions of the same position. The million question will be, do people who have integrity contradict themselves on important national issues such as this? I will ask Google, but I don't think so. That's what he says. Destiny Anthony says people should avoid Beggar Junction. It's like we have riots going on there, so guys with weapons, the police is shooting. All right, okay, somebody may need to tell us about that in the 9:30 mark just to get a good perspective of what you're saying, and also would have to interrogate with regards to that. There's a gridlock here in Gogolada. Please, there's relevant authorities should take charge. Sulaiman from Gwags did write that in as well. Coco from Cuba says, when this government leave office, Nigerians will bear a lot of unthinkable stories and revelations. Unfortunately, we have representatives that don't care about the masses. Can you imagine a huge amount of money they're spending still, and we're getting the impact on our family living? God bless your guests and God bless Nigeria, it goes on to say. Upata in Central area says, for me, do you know that everything that we're being told about deregulation is a lie? It has rather been number few price increase dictated by the government as usual. The new subsidy cost confirms that it is a lie. Is Buhari, the Mr. Integrity himself, still the petrol minister? I'm so surprised, he questions. And then he says, pity, just a pity. Nigerians are paying heavily for what we now see. Antigen from Maraba says, we may not know the monumental corruption in this government until after 2023. It goes on to say, Mr. Epia, let me allow you round off this conversation. There's really a lot to talk about, but I mean, Nigerians have reflected on some of this. You want to respond very quickly before we get to the 9 o'clock mark with regards to this conversation?
Right, I mean, there's nothing more to say. Nigerians have spoken. You could see the indignation, the anger in their responses. You could see that, they are unhappy, especially because they are made to bear the cost of these inefficiencies, waste, and corruption by government officials. And I like the kind of responses because that is the thing we want to seek to achieve, raise the awareness. And when the awareness is raised, people also get to demand accountability and demand that there should be transparency. These demands need to continually be made. It's not make it today and we relapse. We have seen that from what happened at NSAS. If you keep on your demands, at some point things will give. Deregulation is not what it should be. Deregulation is not price fixing. I just wanted to make that remark in response to what one of your respondents said. So let's keep the conversation going within all the spaces. Call your representatives in Parliament, in the Senate, in the House of Representatives. They owe us that responsibility, and we must keep talking in demanding for accountability and transparency in the sector.
Well, I must say a big thank you to you, the founder of Order Paper, Oke Epia, for joining in this morning for this robust conversation this very day. Thank you so much for providing an amazing perspective to this. We'll keep up with you and a lot of what you're doing in your organization. And, of course, we'd like to share conversations such as this that interest the public over and over again. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Stay with us right here on Morning Crossfire. When we do come back after Business and Sports Drive, there'll be more to talk about on the show. What other stories did we leave out? Now will be a good time to catch up. Also, watch out for the updates we've got coming up for you on the show. Thank you so much. This is Nigeria Info.
This is Nigeria Info.
Nigeria Info.
Nothing breaks the news like the news. Trust me, I can prove it. I'm ready. Let's take on the biggest debates on radio, provide insights.